Robocalls are on the rise now that the FCC is trying to curb the growing number of calls. Data from the Robocall Index show that in 2017, November of that year, Americans received about 2.7 billion robocalls.
That number nearly doubled in October of this year. That comes out to almost 2,000 calls every second. Geez. Alex Quilici is the CEO of YouMail, a company that runs a Robocall Index, and joins us now on the set.
Good to see you.
Thanks for joining us. What's a Robocall Index?
So the Robocall Index is just an estimate every month of how many robocalls have been made in the U.S. as a whole and in different area codes and cities and states.
Okay, so what happened? Why is this sudden spike in robocalls?
Yeah, 5 billion is a lot of robocalls for a month, and it's almost double last year. The two drivers are, A, there's a lot of scammers, so there's tons of scammers making scam calls, as I'm sure everybody's experienced. And the second thing that's happened, though, is that people aren't answering the phone. So that's causing all the robocallers to work harder, which in their case means calling more and more and more.
Right,
so
just talking about that.
That's what's driving the increase.
That's interesting.
Are there certain parts of the country that are disproportionately affected by robocalls?
So we've noticed there's more robocalls per person in the South overall. So cities like Atlanta, Birmingham, Florida, places like Florida. We think that's for a couple of reasons. One is people in the South are really polite and want to answer the call, and if you answer the call, you get more of them. Also, if you look at the economics of the country as a whole, Seattle and San Francisco do better than Atlanta and Birmingham. And so if you're doing economically well, you're not getting debt collectors and payment reminders and calls like that. So that's our best guess as to what's happening there.
So what kind of calls are we talking about?
So the biggest call right now is a scam call that basically fools you about your health insurance. So they say it's open enrollment period, they have special deals, they just need information like your birthday, your social security number, your credit card to lock in a policy, and they don't have a product. And so you're basically a victim of identity theft.
Oh, man.
So last week a bipartisan bill was introduced to fight robocalls, and the FCC is getting involved. What is the result of all this activity at the federal government level?
I think it helps. So the federal government, for example, allowed the carriers to block calls from numbers that are just inherently illegal. So an area code that doesn't exist or a prefix that doesn't exist. And so they've done some regulatory things to help the carriers. The rest of the laws will help on the enforcement side. I think right now the FCC only has a year to go after the robocallers, and they tend to need longer to get them. And I think this new bill is talking about 2 or 3 years. So that'll help. So that's what's going on the regulatory and enforcement side to try to deal with the problem. But just like in your neighborhood, right, having laws and police is only part of it. You've also got to make sure you've got a lock on your door. And so we think that the carriers trying to help you know who's coming up, knowing more about the phone number, and robocall blocking apps are what's really going to drive a solution.
But I've seen robocallers getting extremely sophisticated. There's a sort of a new phenomenon in the last year or so, these Chinese calls, specifically that are coming from the New York City area. And what they've been able to do, and these robocalls are originating outside of the U.S., in China. They've been able to figure out what the numbers and the prefix numbers to the Chinese embassy in New York and in Washington, D.C. are, so that when the number shows up on somebody's phone, that you think, if you're a Chinese person, person of Chinese descent, or a Chinese citizen living in the U.S., that you're getting a call from the government asking you to send money if you want to remain in the United States. So how does somebody protect themselves against a nefarious actor abroad?
So that's a really interesting scam, too, because they're spoofing a number. And so there are some things that are going to happen to make spoofing harder. But it's also showing how easy it is to make robocalls. They're calling everybody in the U.S. in order to find a segment of Chinese-speaking people who might be susceptible to this scam. Wow. And so the best way to protect yourself, there's 3 things to do. One is don't answer phone calls from unknown numbers. Just don't. Let it roll to voicemail. Number 2 is protect yourself with a robocall blocking app. Our company, YouMail, has one, but there are others out there. They'll try to suppress your phone from ringing. Our app plays an out-of-service message to robocallers so they think your phone number is no good and go away. And then the third thing is do your homework before calling back. A lot of us just reflexively call numbers back, or we get a message that says it's Citibank or the Chinese consulate and we'll call it. Don't. Google. Look up. Do your homework and your research before you call the number.
Yeah, there's all kinds of websites where you can put the number in, and then there'll be other people there. Oh, it's almost like Yelp, right? The other people there saying, "Oh yeah, I got that call. They're XYZ."
Yeah.
Alex Quilici, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alex. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.